Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation that explores the human factors behind real-world cybersecurity breaches. We have taken a company called NorthLine Retail as our case study. The anatomy of breach was that a fake supplier invoice came at the last moment to our staff saying it was overdue. Our employee under pressure clicked the link without verifying the sender domain. The domain was actually northlineinvoices.co that was mimicking their real site because the company reused their passport on multiple platforms. The single passport lead them to compromise all of their system, exposing customers' data and delaying the orders. The attack succeeded not because of how people work, but because of the system failure, how company works. So the psychology of this click was that it was fast and automatic. It got triggered because of payment overdue notice, and without recognizing the logo and with the artificial urgency, the employee just clicked and bypasses the logical checks. So instead of that, a slow and analytical approach would have prevented this breach. So you cannot export what you were never thought. So ultimately, the business culture praising speed over safety is what got this attack to succeed. So finally, after the end of presentation, I'll be showing a human risk simulator we have made on the basis of Northline company's scenario, where you will see multiple phishing emails and employee can check between phishing and legitimate email. And we also have a module of passport, of setting a passport and applying salt on that. And we also have a module for MFA fatigue test. And the core engine will determine the shared human risk index that will have an index from 4 to 100, showing how risky the approaches could be. So for the next slide, over to Season.
Okay. Hi everyone. Myself Susan Subedi. While Uttam focused on how and why of the human breach, I managed the practical tool evidence portfolio. My role was to ensure that industry standard tools to show exactly how technical controls can mitigate the human risk we identified. I also want to emphasize that all formatters I use the fake data only. No real company password or private information were used in this demonstration to ensure our security was never at risk. So for the next slide, I would like to talk about CyberSafe and SSA 256 hashing. First of all, our test, I use the CyberSafe, which is also known as the CyberSwiss Army knife. I took a test password, which was Northline 2024, and ran it through the SHA 256 hashing recipe. As you can see in the figure, one of our report. This turned to be a readable password into a unique 64-character code. This proves vital security point. A business never needs to store actual password by storing only this one-way hashes. Even if the attacker steals the actual password and the database, they only get the unreadable codes, not only the keys to the kingdom. So my next slide is about the password strength and the metrics. Next, I conducted a comparison test to see how human choices can impact security. I compared the typical weak password, which was reused. One is retail 123 after a long forward passphrase. This result were in the figure 2 were staggering. The weak password could be cracked in just 4.25 seconds, while the password would take nearly 573 billion years to break. I use the entropy formula to prove that the length is much more important than swapping letters for a symbol. This demonstrates that if we want to help our staff, we should encourage long phrases rather than complex, hard to remember string. So my next slide is about the actual finding of our research. To conclude my part of the evidence, this test shows that we shouldn't just blame the human for that mistake. We should provide the actual tools that help them. My testing supports our recommendation for our password manager. If a manager remembers this 573 billion years password for us, it removes the cognitive load and the tired memory issues. As Uttam mentioned, effectively stopping the habit of password reviews before it starts. Now, I would like to hand over to Deepak for the next slide. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Deepak and let's talk about this side. So far we have seen why people fall for phishing and reuse passwords. Those are human problem and training alone won't fix them. This is my section. I'll cover the technical control that back a human up, MFA, encryption and password and access controls. The goal is to assume a mistake will happen and stop that one mistake from handing over the whole store. The next slide is about multi-factor authentication. In our scenario, a staff member used password got fixed with just a password that's game over. MFA adds a second check. Even with a stolen password, the attacker can't get in. But code sent by the text still can be phished. So we recommend phishing resistant MFA hardware keys or passkeys using the FIDO2 standard. These are tied to a real website, so fake site can't use them. For Northline, this is one control that would have stopped this breach. The next slide is about human-centered tech intervention. So what's the fix? Design the technology to carry the load, not human memory. There are three moves for that. Password manager generate a unique password for every system. So reuse ints. Smarter MFA passkeys or number matching. Block the mindless approve tab. And SPF, DKIM, and DMRAC plus warning banners flag old sender before the person has to. The next slide is about redesigning security processes. Tech isn't enough if the process fight people, so we redesigned it. The old way punishes click and reward speed, so staying quiet feels safer than owing up. The resilient way runs blameless phishing practice, measure reports instead of click, and make the one rule non-negotiable. Always ring the supplier before changing bank details. The person stops being the weak link and the become network early warnings. So I would like to call Manis for next slides.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Myself, Manish Karki, and my presentation focus on report compilation, referencing, and final risk management. So, slide 13 is about report synthesis and compilation. My role was to synthesize the group's work into a cohesive final report. I ensured that Season's tool evidence directly supported the human factor theories explored by Uttam and the practical advice given by Deepak. So the slide 14 is about quality assurance and APA 7th referencing. I managed the editorial process, verifying all the technical captions were accurate and that our research was supported by authoritative sources like NIST, the ACSC, and CISA. We maintained strict APA 7th standards throughout. So, in the conclusion, in slide 15, the Northline breach was not a code failure. It was business and people failure, rousing habit, and a culture of speed created the perfect environment for a single well-timed email to succeed. So the final takeaway is the easy choice. So the good defense requires a secure by design approach. We must provide simple tools and clear training so that for every employee, the safe choice is also the easy choice. So for the simulation tool, I would like to invite Uttam again for the explanation. Thank you.
Okay, now I'll be explaining the human simulation tool we have created. So this is the human risk simulator that will analyze on the basis of multiple modules of first going with the email phishing, next password and MF fatigue. Before that, I would like to explain the architecture of how this uh, system will work. So if we look at the overall architecture of simulation tool, the first user will give the input and the different modules, one for phishing, one for password and one for MFA fatigue. We have three modules altogether. They will decide, review and decide the things there, enter the password and respond to the MFA fatigue test. Finally, a case log will be created for that employee, and with that the risk index will increase the number. And this is how overall the simulation tool is going to work. This is just the presentation of what could happen and how employees will act. However, the working things are functional and accurate in its way, but the data we are using are not real, and this is not a real representation, rather the accurate simulation. And moreover, the extra part we did by ourselves is we created a custom SSA 256 implementation without relying on any third-party API. So for the SSA 256, first user enters any text and we convert that into a we encode that into a UTF-8. Later, the message pairing is done per FIPS 180-4, and then furthermore, 64 round compression function is run per 512 bit log. Finally, a 256 bit hash is created that later on in our simulation is further moved, further run by the salt, and a passport is created. Now, coming over to our simulation tool. This is a human risk simulator. This is the interface of our simulation tool. Here we have a human risk index. On the basis of how employee click or react to a certain situation, this risk index is going to go upward. So we started at the baseline of 18, assuming there will be certain risk factor involved when the case file is open. So we have four modules altogether, three modules that are functional, and finally a case log that will give a full event history and how employee responded. So first module is email checker. So here I'll be clicking a random phishing or legitimate response just for the purpose of showing how the risk index goes up. So for this, let's say our employee clicked it as a phishing, it's a correct call. Legitimate, it's a missed call. So this is how this image response part of the simulation tool works. And with the missed call or with all the mistake that makes, the risk index is supposed to go upward. So there is a whole scenario. This is just for the purpose of simulation and not the actual data. So the next module is passport and hashing lab. The SSA 57 output that we made was custom built by ourselves. So if we put a easy password, this can be cracked within a couple of seconds. However, using a long password could take a time. And we can add some salt on the password to make it further difficult to crack. The salt basically adds the string to existing password. The next module is MFA fatigue test. Here multiple screen will pop up with the location of where the uh, request initiated, and upon approving or denying the request, the action further moves ahead. So as an employee, while simulating, I accepted one attacker's request that came from Ukraine, and rest of the uh, requests were coming from Melbourne. So this one was a wrong call. So accordingly, the human risk index is increasing as of the mistakes we are making. Now, finally, the module is a case log, like our event history, where the current human risk index is at 39, and there is the log of what actions we took. The simulation tool can be restarted again, and then uh, can be checked over multiple responses. This is just for the research purpose. However, the data used here is not accurate or represent any real data. The app can be found in this link, and the source of app and source code has been shared in the report. So this is all about our simulation tool and overall report. Thank you.